Good morning, everyone. My name is Yujin from the Department of International Political Economy. Today, I want to talk about why Indonesia is reintroducing protectionism. And maybe first you may wonder, why should we care about this country? Why should we care about this phenomenon? Because here I will use Indonesia as a case to introduce a framework here which you can apply to your own research. So this is the main reason I delivered this presentation. And when we are when we talk about the framework, I want to briefly describe the current situation of Indonesia. When we are thinking about Southeast Asian countries, we may think they are actively attracting the labor-intensive industry which are leaving China. But it is not the case in Indonesia. And for example, Indonesia is reintroducing the licensing system on import goods. And the second is, even though the price of rice domestically is 10 to 20% higher than the price on the world market, Indonesia has successfully regulated the rice imports. So Indonesia and this mode, and this is the mode it followed decades ago in 1980s. So I say it reintroduced protectionism. So I will use the framework to explain this phenomenon. The first part is the political structure, and the second is attitude of stakeholders. The first, Indonesia has a very rigid political structure, and this is because the political reformation after the resignation of President Suharto in 1998. And the first reform is the democratization. And President Suharto had been dominating this country for over 30 years. So he personally can dominate the whole political system. But now the president has to share power with legislature. The second reform was decentralization. The central government has to share power with local government. During President Suharto period, all the investments were concentrated in Jakarta, which is the capital of this country. These two reforms created two main veto players. I'm not saying they can actually veto the policy, but they are very powerful. The first one is president. Second is cabinet. Is strange, but it is because no party can win a majority in past election. So he or she, the president, has to appoint members from other parties as minister. So they may be informed by their own business or party interests. So they may against the president. The third one is the opposition parties in the parliament. And the third is local government. It is very hard to start any serious reform in such rigid political structure. So you may say, if everyone support the reform can start. But it's not the case in Indonesia. So I will then talk about the attitude of veto powers. You see, there are 4 veto powers here, but I think the logic behind these 3 is similar. So I will regard them as a group of veto player, and I call it bureaucracy. And the reason why bureaucracy is not support open trade is because first it doesn't have to support it. Indonesia is an oil exporter, so it don't have to rely on labor-intensive industry to gain money from world market. It can just selling oil and gas to support its budget. And second one is the bureaucracy can seek rent from the regulation. If you are a company want to get license to import some goods, you have to show your kindness to government. So government can seek money from the regulation. The third reason is the bureaucracy is lying with some powerful social groups. Like I've said before, the rice, even though the price of rice is much higher than in the world market, the rice farmer has successfully lobbied the government to regulate the rice. And this is the third reason of why bureaucracy don't support of open trade. And for another veto player, current President Jokowi, do you think he looks like President Obama?
Yeah.
Yes, he was called Indonesian Obama in his election. And actually, he is a pro-trader. He supports the Trans-Pacific Partnership Agreement, but actually, his ambition is limited by the last two factors. The first one, he is also a populist. He has to respond to the request of his citizen, and they are requiring to regulate food imports for such food security. We cannot rely on the food outside the country. We have to support by myself, and it is dangerous to just rely on the food outside. So we have to rely on outside. And the third reason is that he is the outsider of Jakarta, the Indonesia elite. So he cannot completely control his party. He has to listen to the party leader, Megawati, to control his party. So here, in conclusion, why Indonesia is reintroducing protectionism? First, because it is difficult to start any serious reform in this structure. Second, nobody wants to do such reform. So if in your own research, when you want to explain a phenomenon, you can first look at the structure of the background of this phenomenon, and then analysis the attitudes of the stakeholder. That's all. This is my presentation today. I'm willing to take any serious question. Thank you.
Only serious questions.
So you mentioned there are too many veto players.
Yes.
And in your opinion, how you can improve that if you're the president of
Oh, this is very good.
Indonesia?
Yeah, this is a very good question. And I think the first, you have to legitimacy. You have to accumulate the legitimacy. And a majority of legitimacy is from economic performance. So you have to first accumulate political capital, and this capital is from your good governance. And so maybe you can maintain a very high GDP growth rate, and then you can replace many ministers, and you don't have to rely on the support from other parties. You will get the support from citizens. So you can replace the minister from other parties. Then one by one, you can eliminate the other veto players. So you can start your reform. I think this is a long-term strategy for the current president to do the reform. Any question? Thank you.